Hello, and welcome to the Oncology Nursing Society's Leadership Webcast series, and today's presentation entitled Leading Successful Meetings. The planners and presenters of this webcast have disclosed no financial relationships with any commercial companies pertaining to this activity. There will be no discussion of off-label product use, and there is no commercial or non-commercial support for this presentation. I am pleased to introduce today's speaker. Mary McGee-Gullat is the Associate Chief Nursing Officer at Emory University Hospital Midtown in Atlanta, Georgia. With over 30 years of oncology nursing experience, her clinical nursing background spans the specialties of hematology oncology and blood and marrow stem cell transplantation, as well as solid organ transplantation and general medical surgical nursing. Dr. Gullat holds an adjunct faculty position at the Nell Hodgson Woodruff School of Nursing at Emory University and has practiced in dual administrative and clinical roles since 1982. She has presented numerous national and international oncology-related presentations and is well published. She served as the editor for both the Chemotherapy Handbook and Nursing Management Principles in Practice, two ONS publications that illustrate the broad range of her knowledge. Mary is the recipient of multiple awards and grants and was recently inducted into the American Academy of Nursing. It is my great honor to welcome Dr. Mary Gullat.
Greetings, colleagues. I'm excited to have the opportunity to speak with you today regarding leading successful meetings. So regardless of whether your current position or future position has to do with leadership or management, you will find yourself either in the profession or even outside the profession having the opportunity to lead a meeting or to conduct a meeting or to call a meeting. So we wanted to give you the opportunity of hearing some pearls on how you can lead successful meetings. So let's start by talking about the learner objectives for the presentation today. First, we want to identify at least 3 strategies for planning effective meetings, describe the old versus the new meeting paradigm, review strategies for selecting participants to your meeting, developing an agenda, and managing an effective meeting. Identify strategies to maintain effective meeting flow and how to handle people in your group who may be derailers or can't keep the meeting focused. Discuss 4 tips for conducting an effective meeting. So how many times have you been sitting in a meeting or in a group, and the first thing that people said when the problem was being discussed and there was back and forth and people didn't quite know what to do with an issue, and the first thing that came out of their mouth was, let's have a meeting about it. Let's form a committee. Let's form a task force. And of course, when you do that, the next thing you need to do is gather those individuals together and sit and talk about what it is you need to do in terms of problem solving. And Robert Orban said, sometimes I get the feeling that the 2 biggest problems in America today are making ends meet and making meetings end. So I think you may even be able to identify with that yourself. So let's talk about a few facts here. Some data suggests that 25 to 50% of meeting time is wasted. What do you think about that? Think about the last time you were in a meeting that you were not conducting and how much of that time you felt was actually getting to the meat of the meeting. Here in my organization, we may have meetings that will be 50 minutes long to as much as a whole day long. And so you can imagine how it is in terms of trying to say, okay, how much of this, if I reflect back on the end of the day, could have been taken care of in less time or even half the time of whatever the meeting time frame was. So think about your last meeting and whether or not you were sitting there working on your BlackBerry, making notes, doodling on your notepad or whatever because you'd kind of zoned out because they were no longer on subject. Some other meeting statistics, 70% of the time of the meeting is sharing information, giving status updates, creating lists of things to do, and brainstorming. So if that's 70% of our time, given the electronic media today, if it was about sharing information, are there other opportunities or other ways to share the information instead of having a sit-down face-to-face meeting or even a telephone conference call? Giving status updates, is that something that could have been handled through an email? Creating lists of things to do. You're working with the meeting and you have a problem that you're trying to solve, so then first somebody starts, okay, well, let me start a list so I can see what all we need to do in this meeting. And then you actually start to brainstorm, because some of the things will be pertinent for your meeting, and some of the things maybe need to be put in a parking lot, as we call it. That's not for this meeting, but we need to stay on task. We need to stay on point. It's not for this meeting, but hey, how many of you want to work on this other meeting, okay, to get those issues addressed? So just think about how that work flows. Another statistic, 20% of the time is consensus building and aligning, lobbying for their own agenda. Those individuals who are sitting in the meeting, they have what I've heard people phrase it, I have a dog, I don't have a dog in this hunt. So they may abdicate at that point and just kind of stop participating, because it doesn't matter to them which way you decide, because it doesn't have a personal effect on their department or them. But then you have other people where it does matter to them. So that's why they're going to be pushing forward that agenda, going, hey, we need to stay on this subject, because if you do X, it's going to cause Y result with the people that I work with, and that won't work. So those kinds of things in terms of people lobbying their own agenda. Other people check out and don't contribute at all, and it may even affect their department, but they've just kind of zoned out because the meeting has lasted too long. And then discussions go off on tangents. How many times have you been sitting in a meeting when the subject was on, say, chemotherapy safe handling, and then all of a sudden someone starts to talk about orders. Someone else starts to talk about, well, I had a patient one time and they came in and this what happened. And it may or may not relate to what you need to have happen as it relates to what's going on in the meeting to keep it focused for that minute, that moment in time. Other meeting stats, 5% of the time is trying to find prior work or related materials. So whether you are a participant in the meeting or you are the facilitator of the meeting, we all have very, very busy schedules. So you look up and you realize that your meeting starts at 10 a.m. and it is now 9:50 a.m. So you're scurrying back into your office going, okay, the agenda, where is it? And you start leafing through papers and you start looking through folders and looking through your last notebook and trying to find where the material is that you had for the meeting the last time. So how much of that goes on? And that's a time waster. If you were organized and a little bit more about the subject, about the agenda, what your role and your part is in that meeting, then you could be prepared, create a file, and that's usually what I do in terms of trying to stay organized for the multiple meetings that I attend. I create a file that I can take with me to each meeting. So all I have to do is grab and go. 5 minutes of the time is spent in meaningful dialogue and serious discussion of important issues. So now we've gone through a whole meeting, and look at what the time has been. 70%, 20%, another 5%, another 5%. And this statistic says that of that meeting, regardless of how long it is, 5% of the time or 5% of that meeting has been spent on meaningful issues, dialogue, and discussion. The rest of it was extraneous and could have been eliminated. Hence, reducing your meeting, making it more focused, and making it more efficient and effective. So let's talk a little bit about the meeting paradigms. Our current paradigm is one-person control, there's a unilateral agenda, and information flow is one way, as you see depicted in this piece of clip art here. You have one person standing at the front, everyone else is paying attention for a little while, and then of course they start getting distracted and doing other things. I can tell you many times when we actually do video webcasts here at our organization, because we have multiple entities or multiple hospitals. And so you'll see people sitting in the audience, and it almost looks like some people may be asleep, but what they're doing is they have their head down and they're doing their BlackBerry. They're answering emails. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is to try to help people be conscious of what that looks like on the other end. And I've been very conscious of it myself, going, ooh, gosh, I'm not going to be doing that in these meetings. So, or I had to make a conscious decision to get out of the camera eye, right? So anyway, we just need to kind of keep an eye out for those kinds of things. So meetings go too long. What does this picture represent? 5 signs that your meeting is going over too long. You see this person standing at the front of the table pontificating, and he almost seems like he's just listening to himself, because the 3 people that you can see in the picture, one has her head in her hand, the other one has pushed back from the table, his head is down, he's not looking at the speaker, and the other person said, you know what, I give up. I just need to lay down and take a nap, because when I wake up it'll be all over, hopefully, or I won't have missed a thing. Because remember that 5% of the time of that meeting is spent on meaningful dialogue. So these individuals have just tuned this guy out, and he is just going on and on, enjoying listening to himself talk. So even the leader in this picture has gone to sleep. So he must have bored himself. Either that or they're having a conference call, and it's on the telephone, and guess what? The people on the other end who are talking have no clue of what's happening on the other side, where everybody has decided to take a nap and to zone out. But again, you know, this is a little levity to put into the fact that we have meetings that many times are ineffective, and they last too long, and people lose interest. So they're not going to be engaged. They're not going to be coming up with those ideas that we need to really actually problem solve. So let's talk about the new meeting paradigm. This is a quote from Gene Marshall. When a team of individuals come together in a circle with high intentions, miracles happen. So that's really what we want to create here. And you know, I use team in the all caps there to identify that this really is talking about an acronym. Together, everyone achieves more. So I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but that's what a team is all about. So you're coming together in a circle or an octagon, or you're standing up or whatever it is, but high intentions and miracles happen because people know that there's a defined time, there's a defined agenda, and you can move on because people know that it's going to be productive. They're going to stay focused, and you will have miracles happen as a result of that productive and successful meeting. So let's talk about how you start to create that paradigm of having a successful meeting. First of all, you need to look at selecting your participants. What problem has been identified, and then who are the key players or the key stakeholders that need to be at the table to help come up with the solution. If you have, say for instance, you want to start thinking about pulling together a chemotherapy safety council. If that chemotherapy safety council, you need to think about it's more than just about the nurse, the oncology nurse, and the oncologist. If it has to do with medications, you need to bring the pharmacist in. If it has to do with safety, you may want to bring your quality officer in for the organization. You need to bring in someone from your safety council of the hospital to take a look at, or your clinic, to take a look and make sure that you're following safety regulations. You're following NIOSH guidelines. You're following OSHA guidelines. So who's going to be kind of the owner of those things? So make sure you have the right people at the table. And again, the right people at the table are not just the nurses, nursing leadership. It has to be frontline nurses who are actually involved in chemotherapy administration if you're looking at safety, because they're the ones who can tell you firsthand what are some of our issues and what are some of our concerns as it relates to our administration of chemotherapy, when errors happen or potential errors happen, and how could we have prevented them, what are some of the system issues, and what are some of the people issues, but being able to separate those two. Again, that's getting input from others. You want to engage others, as many others as you need to be at the table that have a vested interest in the safety of chemotherapy administration. You want to have personal contact with those members, particularly when you're forming the group. You don't want to just send out a battery of emails because, we all get a ton of emails. Many of them may go ignored for many days or whatever. And then you haven't had personal contact with that individual to say, hey, Jane, we're getting ready to pull together a group to talk about chemotherapy safety, because we've had a couple of errors or because we want to prevent errors. We know that it is high risk, high volume, and problem prone here at our organization. So we want to be proactive and pull together a group to look at these issues that are potential issues that could come up as it relates to administration of chemotherapy. We want to talk about safety for our employees. We want to talk about safety for our patients, safety for the pharmacists, et cetera. So make that personal contact and say, and I thought you would be a great person to participate on this with us. You have great ideas. You work on the front line, blah, blah, blah. So you want to make that person know that you took some thought into the decision to ask them to join the team because you feel like they will be a great contributor. You want to communicate the purpose of the meeting and also, or the committee or the task force or work group, and then you want to let them know what the timeline is going to be. Is this something that is a, kind of a Supreme Court appointment that you're going to be on this from now on, or is it a short time frame of a work group that you need to have a problem, you want to get in, you want to vet it, you want to come up with some rapid tests of change, and then you want to implement those changes and then hardwire those changes if they work. The other thing you want to do is you want to send out the agenda ahead of time for the meeting so that people can be prepared. Again, you want to avoid that 10 minutes before the meeting, people scurrying around trying to figure out what it is they need to bring to the meeting, looking at the agenda that morning and going, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be presenting on this. I forgot. Let me go see if I can pull some stuff together. You want to avoid that because, again, you want the meeting to be productive, and the best way it can be productive is that everyone is prepared and people are bringing what they need to the table. So how do you develop that agenda that you're going to send out ahead of time? Get input from members to develop the agenda. Ask other people what are their issues and concerns as it relates to whatever problem you're tackling. State the outcome you want for the meeting so that we're all on the same page, you're setting the expectations, and so when people come into the meeting, they know what the agenda is, and they also know what goals you have in mind in terms of outcomes that the team wants to accomplish by the end of this meeting today. You want to prioritize the agenda. I can't tell you how many times I've been to a meeting and the meeting is an hour, the agenda is 3 hours long. That just doesn't work. And it frustrates the people who are attending because I really wanted to come because I thought we were going to be talking about X. X is 25th on the agenda, and I know we're not going to have time to take care of that. One of the things that you can do is at the beginning of the meeting, take a couple of minutes to have people take a look at the agenda and ask for input and get consensus really quickly from the group to say, we have 25 things on the agenda. There's more than we're going to be able to handle in an hour, and I want to be committed to valuing your time, get you in on time and get you out on time as I promised. And so what can we delay until the next meeting? So that's one of the strategies that you may want to look at in terms of prioritizing the agenda. Then you want to distribute the agenda at the meeting. Always bring a copy of the agenda unless you're presenting from a PowerPoint screen, because inevitably if you send out the agenda with the thought that people are going to print a copy and bring it with them, someone is not going to remember their agenda. So just help with the organization and the efficiency, and just bring copies of the agenda with you. How do you want to format the agenda? I have an idea that I'm going to share with you on the next slide that shows a way that you can set up your agenda to help it flow. And not only is that the way you set the agenda up, but that's also the way you do your minutes. It's what's the discussion and the action, what are the outcomes, and then who's the person responsible. Okay, let me get the next slide here. Okay, here we go. Look at the agenda here. And we're talking about maybe chemotherapy safety. So the first thing you want to talk about is quality and safety. Chemotherapy safety. Looking at the time to first dose of chemotherapy. The Joint Commission patient safety goals as it relates to this. Transfusion safety. Central line infection safety. So if you're looking at general safety, those are some of all the things that you want to look at as it relates to safety. And maybe there are others that others in the group may want to add. Then again, depending on the length of your meeting, you want to identify how long is it going to take us to have a discussion about these. Chemotherapy safety can be, one meeting all by itself. And then as part of the time to first dose, maybe you're having an issue or concern with the time the dose gets started from the time the patient is admitted or comes into the clinic. The labs are drawn, the orders are written, the chemotherapy is mixed, and now it's time to infuse. What is the time that you want to wait for that? How long do you want, especially if it's an outpatient, a patient is coming in, they really don't want to spend all day, 6 and 8 hours in a clinic, an infusion clinic, when the infusion is going to only last for 2 hours or 4 hours with their pre and post hydration. But yet they're there for 6 or 8 hours because of our processes aren't as smooth as they should be. Transfusion safety with administration of blood and blood products. What issues do we need to look at as it relates to that? How long the infusion hangs? Do we have compatibilities? Do we have access, venous access? The other one is infection rates. The National Database for Nursing Quality, NDNQI, really looks at central line bloodstream infections now. So not just as it relates to cancer patients, but any patients with central lines or bloodstream infections in central lines. So that's something that you may want to look at. And then another way you want to look at it is sort of some of the people in the workplace issues, employee satisfaction, patient satisfaction. So these are all just kind of different templates or examples of templates that you might want to take a look at. So how do you get the meeting started? I am just a firm believer that I want to reward those individuals who are on time. Always start your meeting on time. You set the tone, you set the pace as the facilitator of the meeting. And another thing that I like, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Quint Studer, but one of the things that Quint Studer talks about, he talks about hardwiring excellence and results that last are two of his books. But one of the things that he talks about that I just love to phrase is what you permit, you promote. So if you have a meeting that is scheduled for 9 a.m., you're there at 9 a.m., 3 or 4 other people are there at 9 a.m., 50% of the people are not there, so you're going to sit and wait on them. One other person shows up at 5 after 9, another person shows up at 10 after, 3 other people show up at a quarter after. Now you have a quorum and now you're ready to start the meeting. Well, guess what? You just told all of those people who were on time that their time wasn't valuable. You didn't reward them for being there on time. And for those people who were not there on time, you just rewarded them as well. You said, you know what, you're so important that I'm not going to start this meeting until you show up. So, hey, if it takes you 30 minutes after the meeting to come, we'll wait for you. That's not a good way to be the facilitator of that meeting. You set the tone, you set the pace. If you said 9 o'clock, by golly, have the meeting start at 9. Do your welcome and introductions and also your thanks at the beginning. Allow 5 minutes or so for that, depending on the meeting. If it's your very first meeting, make sure that you clarify the member roles. Let people know what each member is responsible for and why they're here and what their participation is going to be. One of the things that I talked about earlier was all about looking at how you do a chemotherapy safety council. You're inviting the pharmacist, you're inviting the safety officer, you're inviting the quality officer. So you actually introduce all of those individuals and their roles. You identify who the recorder will be. And one of the things that I do, unless you have a designated secretary or someone who's supporting that meeting, I identify people who are going to be minute takers or recorders by using the last name, the first initial of the last name, and just kind of put it in that kind of alpha order, so that each time we meet, everyone knows who will be the person taking the minutes. And so your thought may be, oh gosh, well what if that person knows they're taking minutes, they don't want to take the minutes, so they're going to be like conveniently absent or coming in late that day. Well, then we move right down the line to the next person who is physically there and ready to start taking the minutes. And then the next meeting, the person who was supposed to be there now gets to do their turn. And then you may need to have a crucial conversation if you have people playing those kinds of games and they're not coming to the meeting and being there on time as they need to be. Model the energy of the meeting. If you're going to come to the meeting and be all sluggish and start out with comments like, boy, it's been a rough day, or oh gosh, I'm so tired, well, guess what? You've just set the tone and the mood of the meeting. You need to, come and present yourself as, we're here for business, we have a full agenda, I need your participation, we're meeting only for an hour, we need to get rolling. That will make a difference. You set the tone, you set the pace. Again, setting the tone, setting the pace. Set the meeting goals in the beginning. What is it that you want to achieve, and how do you want to achieve that? Create a positive feeling within the meeting. Don't allow naysayers and people who are not focused to control your meeting. You make sure that you're in charge of your meeting. Share some good news at the beginning of the meeting. If it's a meeting about, let's say, pressure ulcers or ventilator-associated pneumonia or CLAPSY, you may want to say, you know what, over the last month we haven't had any bloodstream infections. That's great news if that's one of the things that you were working on. We haven't had any chemotherapy errors. That's great news if that's one of the things you've been working on. So you applaud the team, you talk about the successes, you give everybody kudos. You want to elicit some comments from other people. What is going on? You want to make sure everybody participates. That's your role as a facilitator. Don't let someone come in and opt out of your meeting and all they're doing is being a seat warmer. So you want to make sure that you are engaging everyone. You know, one of the things I do sometimes when I ask a question in a meeting, I will tell people up front, well, you know, one of the things that I do is, the first thing I do when I'm asking a question is, if I see you kind of avoiding eye contact, you're the first person I'm calling on. So now I got everybody's attention. Everybody's looking at me. So we just need to make sure that we are setting the tone and setting the pace. We want to stay focused. So if you've got people who are trying to derail your meeting, keep them in check. You know, I had one meeting I was conducting one day, and a couple of the nurses were kind of, it was a big table, and there were probably about 20 people in the meeting. So there were a couple of people I noticed passing notes to each other, and then they were kind of smiling. So I called them out. I said, hey, Mary, hey, Sue, do you have something you want to share with the rest of the group? You know, that took care of that. I was not rude, I was not abrupt, but I wanted to let them know that I saw the activity that was going on. And they put themselves in check. They did not do that anymore. And it also sent a message to the rest of the group. We're here for an hour. We have work to do. We all need to be giving it our full attention. Because if you can't, then you don't need to be a part of the group, and you need to go back and do some other work. So again, you're setting the pace, you're setting the tone. You want to end the meeting on time. Keep your promise. Do what you say you're going to do. Begin on time and end on time. The other thing, and sometimes I may even come into a meeting a little bit late, and because of my position, maybe one of the person who's facilitating will think, oh, Mary, thank you for joining us. I just want to let you know where we've talked about blah, blah, blah. I say, no, 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 no. Keep going. I will catch up later. And so you should have the same thoughts in mind when you are working and facilitating your meeting. Don't go back and repeat and catch someone up who was late coming into the meeting. That's a waste of the time of the people who were there on time who have actually already heard that. So now you're repeating it for them, and now you're causing them to zone out because I've heard this. Let me just check my email real quick on my BlackBerry. So, or my Droid, or whatever piece of electronic equipment that you have. So just be mindful that you need to set the tone and you need to set the pace. Expect some conflict. Allow some discussion. Allow some time for discussion. So don't set your meeting agenda for that 60 minutes so tight that you're running a meeting that's 61 minutes. And now people really didn't have an opportunity to dialogue or to vet ideas or to share other opinions because you kept the agenda so tight. So allow some time for discussion. Set limits on the discussion for the agenda items because, as you well know, and I'm sure you're probably having someone in your visual bubble right now thinking, yeah, you know, the last time I was in a meeting, this person monopolized the conversation. They took up all the time. They never gave it a break. I've been in meetings with people who, you know, you try to wait politely for a pause, but they don't pause. They just keep talking. And so you're trying to get a word in edgewise, as my grandmother used to say, and you can't do it because these people are just talking and talking and talking and monopolizing the conversation and not recognizing that they're not letting other people have a voice. Well, that's your role as a facilitator, is that you need to say, you know what, we've heard from you. Let's hear from some other people a little bit about what their thoughts are. It's okay to do that. Create a parking lot list for future meetings and/or discussion. So start out with a poster board or a whiteboard or a flip chart, and you assign someone to just go up and write down things, because that many times when people are bringing up things that are extraneous to your meeting or that's not relevant for what we need to get discussed today, they still want to be heard. And if you write it down so they can see it, they feel like they've been heard. And we will address this later. We're not going to forget it, but let's, you know, that's not pertinent to what we're talking about today. But it's good work. It's a good idea. Let's put it up on the board. And if necessary, remember that first slide I showed you, the best thing to do is have another meeting, right? So if there are things that people are very passionate about, then appoint a subcommittee to take a look at that other agenda item. Maintain control of your meeting flow. And again, you set the pace, you set the tone, you're the facilitator of the meeting, you're the one who can maintain that control and flow of that meeting. Share the power. Appoint a co-leader of the meeting so that if you're not there or if you're not there on time, you're running late in between meetings or whatever, the meeting can still start on time. Appoint a co-leader so you can share the power. Gain consensus whenever possible. If you see that people have varying, you know, you have 20 people in the meeting, you have 20 different opinions about how things need to go, then you refocus the group and say, okay, what do we need to do? What are your thoughts? What are your ideas? We need to come to consensus because this is the outcome that we're looking for the meeting today. Involve the group in the decision making. Again, that's all about shared decision making. Tim Porter O'Grady started that with shared governance many years ago. Shared accountability. Everybody is responsible for the outcomes and the results. So no one is allowed to abdicate that authority as they're sitting in that meeting because they don't like the idea, they don't agree with the outcome, you got it by consensus, but it wasn't everybody who agreed, then everyone needs to agree that they're going to work toward this unified solution. Otherwise, they're going to derail it for you. Shared risk, ownership of the process. People tend to have ownership of the process when they are participants in the process. They're the ones who are part of coming up with the solution. So some effective management ideas. Improve the things that you get from effective management are you improve the decision quality. You decrease unproductive time in those meetings that we've talked about earlier. You minimize reworking decisions because you come to consensus. Don't allow anyone to be silent in the meeting. You actually get everyone to say, what do you think, what do you think, what do you think? And you have them commit their opinion. And then once you come to a consensus vote, then you say, are we all going, so part of your consensus discussion and definition is that once we make a decision by consensus, although it may not be 100%, 100% of us will march forward with that outcome or with that goal or with that strategy of ways of handling this issue. What are some other effectiveness tips? Allow time near the end to wrap up. People sitting on a tack. Anything else we need to put in the parking lot? Where are we in terms of, let's recap real quickly what our decisions are so that we can move forward. Design a realistic agenda, as I mentioned earlier, and allow enough time to take care of it. Allow flow through or follow through. Always follow through on what you said you were going to do or what the outcome of the meeting is going to be. Provide timely minutes. So after the minutes, usually what I do, I will do them or have someone else do them, and I will highlight next steps. And I will highlight the name of the person who's responsible for something. So when they get the minutes, their name pops out there. Set realistic frequency to accomplish the meeting outcomes. If it's something that you need to do a rapid test of change about, then you need to do, you may need to meet weekly. You may need to meet every day. You may need to have huddles. So what is the urgency of the outcome that you need to achieve? And then that kind of dictates or drives your timeline in terms of meeting frequency. As we mentioned earlier, begin and end on time. The new meeting paradigm is there's collaboration, and members experience abundance and creativity and energy. They respect one another. Let every situation be an opportunity for empowerment. So empower your team. Relate to others honestly, compassionately, and transparently. Trust intuitive insights, whether it's yours or whether it's someone else. So these are some of the things that you want to share with the group or as the team as you're forming. Recognize that we are part of an interconnected whole. Jean Marshall is someone you may want to Google and take a look at some of the ideas that she has as it relates to meetings. Some pearls of success. How do you handle people who are derailing and disruptive in your meetings? Assigning follow-up and making meetings fun. You want to make them fun. You also want to handle those derailers because you don't want someone coming in your meeting and then the meeting after the meeting is about how ineffective the meeting was because what you permitted, you promoted. You allowed them to talk. You allowed them to have sidebar conversations. One of the things you may want to do in your meeting is actually have some guiding principles that everyone creates and everyone agrees to and that you read at the beginning of every meeting. That should only take about 30 seconds to a minute, depending on how many you have. Guiding principles that we're not going to look at our BlackBerry while we're in the meeting. We're not going, we're going to stay focused. We're not going to participate in sidebar conversations. All of those kinds of things. And if it's a long meeting, then talk together about how long should we meet before we take a break. How long should the break be? I've gone to meetings where they have sequestered your BlackBerries at the door. So you don't even have a chance to kind of sneak a peek under the table and check your emails. So all of those are different strategies that you can look at in terms of looking at disruptive behaviors. The other thing is people that kind of beat a dead horse. They keep, 30 minutes ago we agreed that we're going to put that in the parking lot and let it go because it didn't apply to our meeting today. And then 30 minutes later that same person brings it up again. One of the meetings I have gone to in the way I do in my meetings sometimes, I have this little horse that I bought out of the toy store. And I actually have the horse sitting up at the beginning of the meeting. And if we have a dead horse issue, I just tip the horse over where it falls over on its side. And if it continues and that person brings it up yet again, I flip the horse over where its legs are up. So, beating a dead horse is not a good way to stay focused and stay on task for having a successful meeting. So again, look at those pearls for success. Look at some of the meetings that you have been in that perhaps you were not facilitating, and you have ideas about, gosh, this meeting could have been so much more productive if. Well, apply that to your own meeting and decide that, you know what, when I conduct my meetings, I'm not going to have this happen or allow this to happen. So that's kind of it in a nutshell in terms of having a conducting successful meetings. And I'll be more than happy to have any of you email me or dialogue in terms of some strategies that you have or some issues and concerns that you have about meetings that you've had that you'd like a little help with. So please do not hesitate I'm one of your colleagues. I'm an ONS member, and I'd be more than happy to coach you. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to have the time to speak with you today on leading successful meetings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary, for sharing your insights on effective meetings. I'm going to show a couple more slides. We have one on selected references in case folks would like to follow up with some of the resources that Mary mentioned during her presentation. And also a saying that Mary has on her slides, I shall pass through this world but once. If therefore there be any kindness I can show or any good thing I can do, let me do it now, for I shall not pass this way again. Very nice. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
And if you are interested in earning CNE for this webcast, please click the link found under webcasts on the Leadership Virtual Community. That will direct you to the Evaluation Center where you can take your post-test and complete the evaluation. Thanks so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
And much success to you in your meetings in the future. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Please stand by.